10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 207. Hey everybody, welcome back into episode 207 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. So happy to have you back, and this is the last Friday episode in the month of April, so you know what that means. That means that we're going to be doing our Tune of the Month etude. And of course, that etude is going to be based off of the concepts we've been looking at all month, which happens to be the bebop scale. And the tune we've chosen is also the tune we've been studying all month. This is going to be the great Duke Ellington composition In a Mellow Tone. So before we jump into the show, I do have some people to thank, some new Patreon members. And if you're new to the show and you're wondering what Patreon is, that is our website where you can get the PDF to every single episode that we've ever done. All 207 episodes have a lesson that goes along with them in PDF form for all keys. And that only costs you $3 a month. So if you'd like to join up to become a member, over 300 members over there, pledging that $3 a month, keeping us alive. You could do that by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon links, getting yourself signed up today, and you receive instant access to all those fantastic jazz education materials. So I've got some people to thank. Thank you to Ismail, Andreas, Solomon, David, and Michael. Thank you guys so much for becoming a member of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. Again, 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners. Get yourself signed up today. All right, let's jump into the etude. So really quickly, let's go over what we've covered so far this month. So first of all, we went over the actual format of the bebop scale over the 5 most common chords that you see in jazz standards and that you'll pretty much see in your jazz life. That was the first thing we did. Then we decided to break up some of the bebop scales over in a mellow tone over the first 8 bars into 5-note segments, dealing with that chromaticism. And that really gave us the ability to have some flexibility with these scales, to be able to start anywhere in the scale, root, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th, all over the place. And that was really one of the most important episodes, one of the most important concepts when it comes to playing these bebop scales fluently, is being able to start anywhere you want and go in any direction that you want. Now, the 3rd episode in the series that came out last week was discussing combining these scales with some arpeggios so that we don't get locked into either a very vertical or very horizontal way of playing. So the etude that I've prepared for you this week is kind of based off of all 3 of those concepts, right? We're going to do a full chorus through in a mellow tone, and we're going to be using as much bebop chromaticism, bebop scale passages as we possibly can. But here's the caveat. It has to sound natural. And at the end of the day, when I teach you these concepts, whether it be bebop scales or anything else that I'm trying to teach you on this podcast, at the end of the day, it has to sound natural and unforced, right? So the listener shouldn't be able to tell when they're listening to you play, oh yeah, that person's working on bebop scales. They must have listened to the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson podcast this month, which was all about bebop scales, and now they're just playing bebop scales all the time. So you've got to figure out a way to work these concepts into your playing organically, where we're not going to be able to necessarily hear the device that you're using, but that device is going to give you yet another option that you can use over tunes to help you achieve the sound that you want. So that's what I've tried to do with this etude. I was concerned less about trying to pack in every single instance of bebop scale that I possibly could, and I was much more interested in writing an etude that would be more reminiscent of a solo that I would actually play, where, yeah, that bebop scale is going to come out sometimes, And granted, I probably used it a few more times than I would have in real life. But then again, I wanted to just make sure that it was in there more than once or twice. But really, hopefully, this etude is going to sound less like a study in bebop scale and more like one chorus of a solo that I would play that just happens to have some bebop scale phrases embedded inside of it. So let's just go over a couple of places right at the beginning of the etude where I am using some of that bebop scale. And then we'll play it for you and let you hear the whole composition here. So if you look at the first two measures, actually, I've used the bebop scale a lot. But here's the thing. It's like exactly what I was talking about. It's pretty natural. It passes off from one measure to the other without having to jump around or force that bebop scale. So I start on the third. I go right up the chord scale. I do the bebop passing tone between the flat 7 and the major 7. I keep going up. Now you'll notice at the end of the measure, I'm only moving a half step. I'm going from the 9th of the first chord to the 7th of the chord in measure 2. And then I'm doing the bebop scale again. So I start on that flat 7, I go up to the major 7, go back up to the root, and then I come right back down the bebop scale. So major 7, flat 7, and then I start my first arpeggio. So then I start to move away from the bebop scale. Now, yes, that does have two bebop scales in it, right in the first two measures. But I got to tell you, that's something that I would play like all the time in my solos. In fact, when I sat down with my saxophone to write this etude, it was literally the first thing that came out of my horn over these first two measures. And it wasn't that I was necessarily thinking bebop scale, bebop scale, bebop scale. It was just a phrase that I would normally play. So there you go. There's first two instances of the bebop scale. Then we don't use anything in measure 3. Then in measure 4, you can see we use that major bebop scale. Right on the downbeat, we go 5, sharp 5 to the 6. Play a nice little phrase there. Then we don't use anything until measure 6, where we're using that dominant bebop scale again. So maybe what you should do is actually go through this etude, try to pick out every single instance that I've used the bebop scale, and then kind of go from there, right? And then maybe you can dig into some of the other phrases, see how I got into the bebop scale and out of the bebop scale, and generally just notice the texture of the etude and some of the devices that I'm using, both bebop scale and non-bebop scale. All right, enough of me talking. Let's check out the etude. This is the entire chorus that I've written for you. See if you can actually hear some of that chromaticism without even looking at it the first time that you hear it. Then go back and see if those spots that you heard were correct or not. All right, here we go. Here's the etude. All right, so there you have it, some chromaticism in there. Hopefully you can hear some of that bebop scale happening. It does happen quite a bit in there. So hopefully your ears are starting to be able to pick out some of that chromatic movement, especially when it's contained in a more horizontal line like we've been talking about. That's where your ears need to start to be able to pick that up. And it's amazing. Once you sort of learn about all these devices and all these different sounds, I find that like transcription is a lot easier once I can hear all these concepts. It's almost like you can do a little bit of dictation once you really understand these concepts. And you'd be amazed at how much our favorite musicians use these concepts that we talk about on the show verbatim. like exactly how we talk about them. And if you can really perceive those and hear them, it's really amazing how your perception of the music changes and your listening time becomes so much more valuable because you're actually picking out different things and say, oh, well, that musician's using this like exact device here, here, and here, and here. So just another reason to keep at this, to keep studying this stuff and really let it enrich everything from your listening to your playing and everything in between. All right. So hopefully you got something out of that etude. Make sure you go and grab the PDF so that you get the maximum benefit out of that. And if you don't have access to the PDF and you would like access, go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and get your copy today. Only $3 a month. All right, going to close out the show by just playing over Mellow Tone for a little while. We'll see you all next week. I hope you are all staying happy, healthy, and safe out there. It's been a bit crazy for the past month and a half or so, but we're just going to keep on going here. All right, we'll talk to you soon, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye.